This is Stacy McKibben with the Master Communicator Podcast, where CEOs, senior leaders, and C-suite executives share their advice. It's 6 questions in 9 minutes because the best leaders know how to share their ideas concisely and quickly. Let's jump right in. Question number 1. In a few sentences, please tell us who you are and what you do.
Thanks for having me, Stacy. Heath Goldman, Icon Wealth and Legacy Partners, created the company about 15 years ago. Work with business owners and real estate families in the areas of life insurance, estate planning, asset protection, and wealth transfer planning.
I can imagine the last couple of years have been kind of crazy in that world, yes? With all the COVID and the pandemic and the craziness that supports that.
Yeah, and then you had a few tax law changes thrown in on the way under President Trump, and now you've got speculation of what the Biden administration is going to do. So, yeah, it's been interesting. And but I would also say that last year when the pandemic first hit, it gave families the opportunity and the time to actually take a look at what their plans look like and plan accordingly. So it was good to see that.
I love that. Well, that actually takes me into my first question for you, which is, what is legacy planning? Help us to understand what that even is.
I use somewhat of a morbid explanation. You're sitting in the pew at your funeral, listening to people talk about you. What are they saying? How are you going to be remembered? That's really what legacy planning is. And we add to or distract from our legacy every single day. Actions, words, whatever it may be, but people need to think about what that legacy is going to look like and shape it while they are still living, able, and can make the changes accordingly.
So funny that you say that, because even with my son who just turned 13, I talk to him all the time about future Max. Like, is that decision you're doing today, how's that going to affect future Max? Do you think that's going to help him or hurt him? It sounds a lot along the same what you're saying there.
Very much so. I love hearing that.
So who and why should someone plan? Who should plan and why should they plan?
Well, most of my clients are either closely held business owners or real estate families. That's primarily who we work with. Okay. And the matter is that these people own assets. They have family most of the time. You need to plan because most of my clients never just planned to fail. They failed to plan.
Yeah.
So most people need to create a plan. The question is what type of plan are we creating and how many steps does it necessarily take to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish as a family?
Could you give me some examples of some good plans or how to go about something like that?
Well, the first place I almost always start with clients and recommend people start is in the estate planning process. It's not just about what happens to me if I die. What happens to me if I become if I can't make my own decisions? Mm-hmm. What if my children need somebody to take care of them because I'm incapacitated? All of these issues are real life situations that need to be addressed and dealt with. And you can't deal with them after the fact oftentimes unless you have court intervention. And that's really what planning is in the estate planning process, is to avoid that. Avoid having to go to court. Avoid having to get a conservatorship. Avoid this, avoid that. Make your own decision. So I almost always start in the estate planning process with my clients.
Yeah, I often hear the phrase, if you don't do the planning, the courts will do it for you, or the states will do it for you, and they probably don't have the same plan in mind for you.
That is absolutely correct. The state of California, for those of you who live in California, absolutely have a plan for you. But as Stacy, as you just mentioned, it may not be the plan that you want for you and your family, and you're absolutely correct.
I hear a lot too that the siblings tend to fight over the estate after the fact as well. That I've heard many attorneys say if they could talk to their clients, what they would tell them is, your children will fight over your assets after the fact, plan beforehand. Do you find that that's the case that you've seen as well?
Yes and no. I mean, that happens a lot. But, what I tell people is this: if you're going to make a decision, make it during life and explain it to the people who are concerned and who will be concerned by it. Because at the end of the day, if we can have a communication between mom and dad, son and daughter, grandma and grandpa, whatever it may be, you deal with these issues during life. And that's the challenge that a lot of people, that's the challenge that people have when they don't plan, is that these issues arise after death and it becomes a fight as opposed to a conversation.
Yeah, I feel like, Supreme Court here, where we're having to interpret what we thought mom and dad intended, or what what they really wanted for us. And now you're having to decide that after the fact versus having that conversation beforehand.
You're absolutely correct.
I can imagine that conversation, though most families tell you that's a pretty difficult conversation.
It is. But difficult conversations is exactly what we do. We encourage them. Oftentimes we're spearhead them, and we encourage them between the family members under the right circumstances. But you have to have them, because after death, it's hard to explain to people what your real intentions were. And in leaving things to interpretation is never a good idea in the planning process.
Yeah. I think this is the one time where the ostrich sticking their head in the sand is not a benefit.
No, you're absolutely correct.
So how does your legacy impact business and or wealth? I mean, what does that actually look like?
Well, the one thing I always ask people is how does the community view you? Do they view you as a party or an entity that is involved in the community? Are you sponsoring the Little League? Are you sponsoring the churches? Are you sponsoring the synagogue events? Are you part of the community? Because as people get to know you and see you in the community and see that you're doing, good things in the community, then they're going to want to be able to be part of your company and support you and your family. And I always encourage my business owner clients to get involved in the community in some form or fashion.
There's good tax benefits for doing that too, but we all know that doing well by doing good is still something that I think from a heart space is, I don't know, again, when you're on your deathbed, what do you want people saying about you? That you did more good or that you sent more emails?
You're absolutely correct. And we always try to get people to think about that. A lot of times we hear charity begins at home. Doing good by doing well is really what's important.
So what are some of your top tips then for getting started? What's the first thing someone should do, and walk us through some of the ways to go about it?
Commit to doing it.
Mm.
I mean, that's so easy to say, but you've got to find the time, you've got to find the right resources, and you've got to find the right people that are going to take you through this planning process. And it can be overwhelming if you don't do it correctly. And I'd like to think that after being in the business for 25 years, 15 on my own, that we do it correctly. And that's the one thing that we try to do is make this process easy on the clients so that they can go focus on their money-making activities and on their family. And that's what my clients do a great job of.
Have you ever heard the quote from Jack Canfield where he talks about commitment? He says, 99% is a bitch, 100% is a breeze. Meaning, if you're even got your little pinky toe out, you're going to have to reaffirm that commitment over and over and over again. Versus if you're just 100% committed, you'll find the resources, you'll find the way, you'll find the time to get it done. But that lack of commitment will hound you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you. And like I said before, my clients didn't just plan to fail. Oftentimes before they came to us, they failed to plan.
Yeah. And again, I think we see that all the time, even in business ourselves. We talk about planning your work, then working your plan. I think, who was it that taught us? Brian Tracy, you save, 3 to 4 hours in production for every minute or 10 minutes that you invest in the planning process. So the stats are overwhelmingly in the favor of doing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it takes time and it takes commitment. And we understand that these clients are typically busy with their money-making activities and busy with their family, but we strongly encourage to go through the planning process.
Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you on this show, Heath. I mean, I always learn so much when I talk to you, so it's such a delight. I'm curious, if somebody wanted to reach out and introduce themselves or learn more about you and your practice, how might they go about finding you?
Yeah, phone number is 818-981-7184, or the email address is heathg@iconwlp.com.
That's awesome. Well, and my crew knows, my audience knows, I will put the links in there in the description below. We'll get your LinkedIn in there as well, and your website, so that people can click right on that and they can find you right away.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, I do hope you come back and join us on the show at some point. It would be awesome to have you back on. I'm sure you've got other thousands of things that you love to talk about. But until then, this is Stacy McKibben with the Master Communicator Podcast. For more ideas and insights, please do go check us out at www.concilioteam.com. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. Take care.